It's better to have a mediocre strategy executed well than it is to have an excellent strategy executed poorly. It is? Of course it is. Welcome to The Real Deal. This is Greg Corrali. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to be talking about execution. In fact, execution. E cubed, as I call it, e to the power of 3. We are on essential number 10 of my 10 essentials of safety excellence. Can you believe it? It's been 10 weeks already? All right, I want to start out with that quote. That quote was from Harvard. So I was up at Harvard, yes, Harvard Business School, about a dozen years ago. I was up there for a couple of months as part of their advanced management program. And there were a lot of nuggets, golden nuggets, I would say, that I received from my time up there. There was a lot of other stories that I'm going to share as well. That's a whole podcast in and of itself. I met Jack Welch, iconic figure in business, of course. But I had all kinds of experiences, and I'll do that in another podcast. But this was an appropriate quote of what I heard up at Harvard and what they think about strategy and execution of strategy, right? Harvard is all about how do we educate people, both students and then graduate students, business people, how do we develop skills and share experience with them so that they can apply to their companies and make their businesses better, more profitable, and a whole other set of metrics for sure. So that's what I heard up at Harvard, and I believe it. Who doesn't believe it? Well, hopefully after the podcast today, you'll believe more that execution is critical, right? What is execution? It's getting things done. That's what your organizations want from you. You think they want victims providing excuses for why things didn't happen? Your boss and your organization, the company you work for, they want you to get things done. They need people to get results. That's how business works. So I believe that execution is the single greatest skill that you can learn, develop, and practice so that you can be successful in your career and in your personal life. So, in thinking about execution, because it's one of my 10 essentials, it's number 10. Execution is the underpinning of the entire safety leadership system called 10 Essentials of Safety Excellence. Now, I just used a term that I haven't used before. I said it's a safety leadership system. I wanted to put that out there, and I'm going to circle back to that, and then I'm going to talk to that concept as we move forward in the next several weeks. So execution to me, as I thought about it and applying it to the 10 Essentials of Safety Excellence, it's a force multiplier execution. That's why I call it execution. E cubed, e to the power of 3. Why? What's a force multiplier? Well, it's somebody or something that enhances the overall effectiveness of the team or effort. Execution is a force multiplier. It makes all the other elements of the safety system better when you execute them well. Okay, that's the introduction for today. So let's take a step back. I'm going to cover a couple of things today. First thing I want to do is get you to think about, as I did, examples of effective execution. If you think about organizations or businesses out there, when you think about who or what organization has executed well, has implemented a process or a strategy and really executed well consistently over time, who comes to mind? Well, I've got a couple of sports examples to share first. How about, to start off, the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, right? 6 Super Bowls. Talk about a team and an organization that put a process in place and then engaged in disciplined execution of that process when it came to practice and training and drills, you name it, and producing a consistent result over time. They became a dynasty. Now, the one thing they didn't do, they got a little bit little bit of an asterisk on their record. And let me tell you, I'm one who admires Tom Brady as well. He's obviously one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But what he didn't do is beat the New York Giants, my favorite football team. In fact, he lost to them twice in 2008 and the 2012 Super Bowls. Could you imagine a head-to-head matchup that bumbling, clumsy Eli Manning beat Tom Brady head-to-head in the Super Bowl on an international stage? That was my glory. That was my glory. Okay, what other sports franchises do you think of when you think about someone who put a process in place or a strategy and executed it well? How about the Chicago Bulls? Phil Jackson, the coach. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have Michael Jordan on the team, right? Okay. And the last sports example, how about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team and their manager, Herb Brooks? I mean, he was able to gather up a bunch of kids, right? College athletes from around the U.S. and Canada, bring them together, institute a discipline, regimen, and process, and execute it on it over and over again at the highest standard, such that the U.S. team beat the Russian national team, and then a couple of other teams to go on and win the gold medal. I mean, do you believe in miracles? Yes. Yes, I do. I hope you do as well. All right, what about a few business examples? Who comes to mind when you think of successful companies who put a strategy in place and execute it year after year after year? Which reminds me of the movie The Family Man. How about Apple? Easy example, right? Tesla, Spotify, Walmart, Toyota, Google, Nike, Starbucks. Look, I got to say, I don't get the Starbucks thing at all. I will admit, the only thing I like at Starbucks, I mean, if you're forced to get a cup of coffee and there's only a Starbucks around, I guess you got to do it. But I don't know why you would pay a couple of dollars for burnt, bitter coffee. I just don't get it. It's like a cult-like behavior of people who drink Starbucks. I will admit, though, just like Michael Knowles, every fall I will go in for a couple of cups of their pumpkin spice lattes. I do admit that. All right, how about a couple of banks? How about Wells Fargo? They've had their issues, right? But they're one of the biggest banks out there. And they've had some ethical issues in the last couple of years. But they were a company who produced consistent returns over long periods of time. In fact, they were one of the companies in the Good to Great book by Jim Collins, if you remember. That book came out, gosh, over 20 years ago already. But Wells Fargo was one of those companies who produced consistent returns. And then lastly, how about JP Morgan Chase, right? The biggest bank on the planet. In fact, speaking of JP Morgan Chase, let me give you one other quote here from Jamie Dimon, their CEO. This is what Jamie Dimon said. "I'd rather have first-rate execution of a second-rate strategy anytime than a brilliant idea and mediocre management." Truer words were never spoken. Look, what do those companies have in common? They put in a repeatable process and strategy. They were disciplined in how they lead and manage. And they're relentless when it comes to execution. And I believe those are the three keys to effective execution. So we'll talk more about those. Now what I want to do is I want to apply this concept of execution, right? Or this force multiplier concept of E to the power of 3, E cubed to the 10 essentials of safety excellence. Now, execution, right, is the underpinning of the entire safety leadership system. It's an essential in and of itself. That's easy to say. But it also enhances, when it's done at a high level, enhances all the other 9 essentials. So that's what I want to talk about. So I want to apply it to 3 of the essentials today. I'm going to pick a people essential, a process essential, and a performance essential, and we're going to apply execution to it. These are items, essentials that I covered previously, but I want to apply execution to it so you see when you execute at a real high level, what that a safety essential looks like and feels like. So the first one we're going to apply it to is ubiquitous employee engagement. It's a people element, right, of the safety essentials, of my 10 essentials. So what would execution at the highest level look like and feel like when it comes to employee engagement, ubiquitous employee engagement? Well, let me give you a few examples. When you're executing at the highest level, wouldn't that mean that craft workers are running your grassroots safety committee meetings? Your safety councils, right? Your safety committees at the lowest levels? Well, do they need some skills in order to do that? Yeah, they probably need some training. How to run an effective meeting. Maybe they need some fundamentals of safety training. Maybe they need to be trained in root cause analysis methodology so that they know how to run an incident investigation if the safety committee gets involved in that. Your organization, you can teach them all that, right? You've got the resources to do it. What does it look like as well? It looks like when you're executing at the highest level, your union representatives and frontline supervisors are involved in incident investigations. Maybe they're even leading those incident investigations. Let me ask you a question. Do you provide the fundamentals of safety training to all your employees? Yeah, all your employees, whether you have 500 or 5,000. Now you might say, how can we apply training to 5,000 people? It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. Well, did you think about maybe just an hour-long online training course that every employee can take at their convenience that would give them the basics of the fundamentals of safety and how they might apply to your business and industry? It can be done. That would be performing and executing at the highest level. And then beyond that, providing specific training for specific classifications of employees who perform specific tasks. And they're exposed to certain hazards. They need to know how to work safely around those hazards or mitigate or eliminate those hazards. A couple of more examples under ubiquitous employee engagement and what effective execution looks like. How about going out to do an audit of, I don't know, maybe a dozen audits, and look at how your work groups are performing pre-job briefs, right? You know what a pre-job brief is, right? It's the brief before the work task where everybody gets around who's going to be involved in performing the work. They talk about the job that's going to be done. They talk about the individual responsibilities of each party and what they're going to do. They talk about the hazards associated, and they talk about how they're going to either eliminate or mitigate those hazards or utilize PPE, administrative procedures, etc., to mitigate those hazards. So how about if you went out and you did an audit of a dozen pre-job briefs and they were all performed at the highest level? They were excellent. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do. And then you stood back and you watched them execute the job beautifully. Everybody exhibiting safe behaviors. Wouldn't that be executing at the highest level? It would be. And then one last one here. How about you utilizing safety as a factor in every employee's performance evaluation? Every employee, from the CEO right through to every last worker getting things done on the job every day. Evaluating what did you do to contribute to the safety effort and the positive safety culture that we're trying to create in this company. Did you participate on a safety committee? Were you involved in an incident investigation? I mean, there's all kinds of activities. Maybe it's a one-time effort to participate in this specific safety initiative, to come up with new ideas. So those are a bunch of examples of what effective execution, when it's applied to ubiquitous employee engagement. So that's a people element. Let's talk about a process element. And the process element we're going to talk about is the first essential that I covered with you many weeks ago, standards of excellence. What's that when it comes to safety? Well, it's defining your safety strategy, targets, objectives, initiatives, and actions. All right, so that's what the standards of excellence is when it comes to safety. So let me give you a few examples of when you're executing at the highest level, what does that look like in terms of the standards of excellence, safety standards of excellence? Well, I would ask, do you have a safety mission or commitment statement that talks about purpose, vision, and values? Right? Why are we so concerned about safety? Why do we want to perform our work safely? What's our vision when it comes to safety? Where are we going in the future, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out? And what are the values that we want to exhibit when it comes to safety, right? That's a mission statement. I know they can be complicated, but keep it simple. Purpose, vision, and values. Many companies have adopted what is either called a safety mission statement or a safety commitment statement. It's a demonstrable way that the organization can share with every employee, this is what we believe when it comes to safety. All right, I mentioned it just previously. Executing at the highest level means you've got a safety strategy, a 3-year, a 5-year, maybe even a 10-year safety strategy that has objectives, initiatives, targets, action plans, etc. Another example, a balanced scorecard of safety metrics. Those performing at the highest level and executing at the highest level will have a balanced scorecard of safety metrics of both leading and lagging indicators, right? The higher in the organization at the highest levels, there will be more lagging indicators than leading indicators, right? Because you get paid for results, the bottom line, how many injuries occurred, what's the culture survey score, etc. And as you move down in the organization, where the work gets done, you would expect to have on those scorecards more leading indicators than lagging indicators. Why? Because if you're confident in the safety management system and the activities that you're carrying out, measure them at the local level. And when you do that, and as long as you're executing on those, they will produce the overall intended result that you hope to expect. Another one, I mentioned it earlier, a culture survey. You might have a culture survey in place to measure the safety culture of the business. If you're performing and executing at a high level, you will have a culture survey in place. There's a few of them out there. I'm not going to endorse any particular one, but I was the recipient as a customer of putting in place a couple of culture surveys in the companies that I worked for. Performing at the highest level, executing at the highest level when it comes to standards of excellence, you would be constantly looking at your safety performance, certainly on a monthly basis. At lower levels, you want to measure it even daily or weekly. You'd be looking at it monthly, quarterly, annually, and you'd look at the trend over several years. Are you stagnant? Is your trend upwards? Or is your trend declining when it comes to safety? Are you looking at that data? Are you making sure that your safety professional staff is putting that information in front of you, doing the analysis, and sharing with you? Here's where we have breakdowns in our safety management systems and where we're exhibiting unsafe behaviors, and that is causing us accidents. So therefore, right, then you start to talk about action planning and what you can put in place to address those issues. And then lastly, the companies that do it the best, right, and execute at a high level, they benchmark others in their industry. They go look at who's the best when it comes to safety. What are they doing? Let's go benchmark them. We'll share with them what we're doing. We'll adopt best safety practices that they have, and we'll bring them back and we'll implement them at our company. Yes, they do apply. Don't fall for, well, that would never work here because we're different than that. You're not different. I've done this too many times in my career where those practices apply. Those practices even apply across industries. They transcend industries. So that's a process element. So we've been through people, process. Now I'm going to give you one more. Let's talk about applying execution to a performance element. Omnipresent, fearless leadership. So when you're executing at the highest levels, when it comes to omnipresent, fearless leadership, here's what it looks like. Do you challenge everything and walk by nothing? This is a mantra I've used in the past. So whether you're the CEO or you're a first-line supervisor or you're a craft worker on the line, do you challenge everything you see and everything you hear when it comes to safety? If something doesn't look right, or if you overhear something and it doesn't sound right, maybe the person doesn't understand what their role is, do you challenge it? Do you stop them? because you have stop work authority. OSHA gives you that right. You have stop work authority if you believe something is about to be done that's unsafe. So, do you challenge that or do you let it go by? You might regret letting it go by, so challenge everything, walk by nothing. There's nothing wrong with seeking clarification. You can do it in a very professional and respectful way. Here's a key one when you're performing at a high level, get out from behind the desk. You can't lead safety from behind the desk or behind a Zoom screen. You need to go see people where they work in their environment. You need to see the hazards and the elements that your workforce is exposed to, so you understand and appreciate what they go through in order to get the work done safely every day. You need to listen to their concerns, especially as management, and you need to act on their concerns and their issues. That's what performing and executing at a high level looks like. Do you say thank you when people perform work safely? Or do you just say, it's a condition of employment, they should work safely? Well, word to the wise, think about how you make an employee feel when you say, you know what, that job brief was awesome. And then the way you guys executed that work, I saw safe behavior after safe behavior. You used all the right safe work practices and procedures. You donned the right PPE. That was excellent. Now imagine how that crew is going to feel when they go home at the end of the day. That's awesome. How about craft workers challenging each other when unsafe behaviors appear? So, do you have those fearless leaders in the organization? Look, I've seen this before and I've seen some tragedies. I even remember a junior employee, an apprentice, who really just came out of training, so the rules were fresh in his mind, the safety rules. He tried to hand PPE to a journeyman on the job. He tried multiple times and the journeyman denied it. And a few minutes later, a tragic accident happened. And that journeyman is now maimed forever. Was that apprentice exhibiting fearless leadership? Yeah, he was. He was. Now, he couldn't force him to wear that PPE, but maybe there's thousands of employees, those junior employees, who did interfere, who did stop work, who did try to hand PPE for somebody, and it may have just been an oversight. Maybe they were thinking about something else that happened at home, and they forgot to don a key piece of equipment or follow a work procedure. And a junior employee reminded them and saved their life. I bet you that has happened thousands of times in the workplace. That's what fearless leadership looks like, and that's what executing at the highest level looks like. So those are some examples of applying execution at the highest level to omnipresent, fearless leadership. So that's a performance element. So we've been through all of them: people, process, and performance. Okay, now I want to transition to what I talked about earlier when I talked about sports franchises and business companies, right? And the keys to effective execution of their strategies. I believe the keys to effective execution are three things: process, discipline, and accountability. Sounds pretty harsh, I know, but let's discuss those. I believe you need a repeatable governance process, and you can apply that to safety. A repeatable governance process. You need rigorous and disciplined follow-up. And you need tenacious, relentless accountability. So again, process, discipline, and accountability. A repeatable governance process, rigorous disciplined follow-up, and tenacious, relentless accountability. Those are the keys to effective execution. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right? So think about the simplest of example. You run a production line and you have production goals every day for that shift. Okay, maybe you establish a daily call. At the end of the day, a handful of people get on the call and we review the production for the day, right? Everybody has a role. It's the same time every day, 5 p.m. We do the call. We have an agenda. It's a repeatable process. We have people, they know what their responsibilities are. They report out on what their production is. They say, we achieved our production today, or we did better than goal, or we did worse than goal. If we did worse than goal, here's why we didn't make goal. Here's the issues that got in the way. I was waiting for a part for this person. I didn't get the information here. We've got that rectified. For tomorrow, production should be back on track. Terrific, right? A simple process. So that process, I like to call it a cadence. It's a frequency, it's a format, and it's a sequence, right? That's what we set up here. Frequency of a call or a meeting, you got a certain agreed upon format, and then you have a sequence of items that you run through. And that was the example that I shared. I liken this back to whenever I hear the word process, I think of the movie Moneyball. It's one of my favorites, right? New general manager played by Brad Pitt. He's trying to apply a new methodology to winning as the general manager of the Oakland A's. This happened back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And they were a team that was getting to the playoffs, but they couldn't get to the World Series, right, to play for the big game. So they were looking for a new method. And they found a new method. They used statistical analysis and made decisions based on that to try and get to the next level. And they certainly had some level of success with it. But in the movie, right, Brad Pitt says, this is a process, it's a process, it's a process. So that's what you've got to put in place, a repeatable governance process. And then have that rigorous follow-up, disciplined follow-up, and tenacious, relentless accountability. So, you might think some of that is harsh, right? Now, it might be a bit of a tricky situation when day after day you've got a participant that's reporting out and they're not getting things done. They're not meeting the production goal. So they're providing excuses. Well, I didn't get the part, I didn't get the information, but it wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It happens day after day after day. Well, now you might have a pattern, and you certainly can address some of that in that forum so that you model what it is you're looking for the rest of the team. Okay, why aren't you rectifying these issues? What help do you need? What support do you need? Do you need other resources? Do you need something from me as the leader of the department? What is it that you need? Because providing excuses day after day is not acceptable, right? Because the organization expects you to get things done. That's why you're in your job. That's why you're on a production line. They expect you to produce. So, when you think, and that's why it's again important that when you do hit goals, it's important to praise people and recognize people, right? Because that's a reinforcing behavior. But I know when people think of this sometimes and you start to apply that accountability at times has such a negative connotation. It really just means being answerable, right? It means you own a particular action or a metric or a result, and you have to answer to it, both good and bad. If it's good, great. Here's what we did and here's how we achieved it. Excellent. If you didn't, it's important to understand why you didn't achieve that goal or that task didn't get executed for the day. Here's what got in the way. Here's what we've done to correct it, the action we've taken. That's critical, right? That's what a leader wants to hear. A boss wants to hear. Here's the action we took to rectify things. We should be back on track for tomorrow. And then you measure that progress. Look, that isn't micromanagement. It's project management. That's what it is. It's not being hard on people. It's holding them accountable to their obligations based on the position they hold in the organization. So, okay, a little bit of a word on this victim mentality, right? Because I like to apply this concept of the ladder of accountability, right? The ladder of accountability, you can Google it. It's this, to me, the single most effective HR tool out there. And I know I at times ridicule HR, but here's one where they get credit on. The ladder of accountability has 8 rungs. At the bottom, you're a victim. You provide excuses rather than being on the top rung of the ladder of accountability, which is making things happen. Organizations want people that make things happen. They don't want people to provide excuses or be a victim. Things get done, results get achieved, outstanding business results happen due to people who make things happen. Now look, performance issues, especially in industries that have been out there forever, right? 100-year-old industries. Performance issues may have existed for years, even decades. It's part of the culture. You might run into those. Oh, look, I'm going to do a whole podcast on performance management. I can't wait to do that one, right? But those present more challenging situations. You can seek help on how to address those specific situations. You can let them know, hey, look, it's a new day, right? We're not accepting that anymore. This is the standard of performance that we expect. And here's how we're going to help you get there. I'm sure if I polled, and you've probably seen polls in organizations for decades, I guarantee you there's a lack of accountability as a thread throughout many industries and many organizations. And what happens when there is? The business suffers for it. You get a lot more yellows and reds on your scorecard than you do greens. There are poor results across the board. So don't be a victim. Look for ways to get through obstacles and get things done. That's what your boss wants to see and wants to hear. All right, so we're close to the end here. The summary is this. When it comes to effective execution, right, and making execution be a force multiplier for all the other safety essentials, or in anything that you do, quite frankly, even beyond safety, these few things: build a repeatable governance process and establish a cadence. Instill a model of disciplined execution of task completion, and apply accountability, both horizontally and vertically in the organization. Accountability works both ways. Peers can hold each other accountable, and vertically you can hold each other accountable. Look, as a leader, you should be open to feedback. I know I was. Feedback is a gift. I always ask craft workers, look, I may not see something that I'm doing, right? I need you to call me out on that. And they have in the past, and I appreciate that. You need to be called out as a leader when maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? You need to be providing a certain amount of direction and expectations and support so that the line workforce can get things done. So accountability works both ways in the organization. Everybody's got an obligation to perform their role to achieve E to the power of 3. So that's it, folks. That's essential number 10 of the 10 essentials of safety excellence, but you are not rid of me. I'm going to be back next week to talk about the safety leadership system, because that's what this is. This is a safety leadership system. I'm going to talk about that more next week when I return. Many organizations have a safety management system, right? That's the core of the safety program. It's essentially the what of safety, right? These are the elements that make up our safety program that we have implemented throughout our organization to keep people safe. That's a safety management system. What I'm sharing here, my 10 essentials, I believe, is a safety leadership system. It has safety management system as one of the 10 elements. It's the core. It's the what. But most of the other 9 essentials on top of that safety management system are now the leadership traits and characteristics that are important to effectively implement that safety management system and achieve safety excellence. So it's a safety leadership system. I'm going to talk more about it in the future, starting with next week. Thanks for joining me on The Real Deal, and I'll see you next week. Take care.